I rise to speak on the Boots on the Ground Raising Resilience report. I want to thank my fellow senators and a big thank you to the Secretariat of the Senate Select Committee into Australia's Disaster Resilience. The committee was established in November 2022 to inquire into Australia's preparedness and recovery workforce models, as well as considering alternative models for disaster response and recovery. There have been unprecedented number of natural disasters over the past few years, and the science is clear. It is only going to get worse. And some of these communities not only got hit once or twice, they're now, I reckon, about today getting hit a third time. Just one after another after another. Research by KPMG found that in 2022, 18 million Australians were living in areas impacted by at least one natural disaster, and in some cases, multiple events within 3 years. Over the last 18 months, members of the committee have heard firsthand from Australians struggling to get communities back on track after floods and bushfires. The committee and I met with many of these impacted communities, and I would like to thank all those Australians for sharing with the committee their thoughts, their experiences and their advice, and at sometimes their heart and their soul. And for some that have been hit 2 or 3 times, I can assure you their psychological strength to come in and go back over their tragedy. I give all credit to those Australians who did that, and thank you. Some of these Australians had lost everything. Some of them still living in caravans and tents. 12 months, 18 months, 2 years later. Some of them had given up and just moved away and restarted to build their lives, and many, too many, are still starting to rebuild their lives. Hearing from these Australians that the coalface of these disasters was powerful. The resilience, the quick thinking and the downright bravery brought a lot of us to tears, let alone the lives that were saved when ordinary Australians put their own on the line. The committee cannot direct the government to back our recommendations in, and of course we can't direct where they put their funding, but I would encourage them to take a close look at the committee's report. If the government is serious about protecting communities across the country, they're going to have to find a lot more money to make this happen, I can assure you. According to the CSIRO, building back better would be a good start, and if you actually did it properly, would be phenomenal, because I was not seeing that during our time out there. If you do not get that infrastructure correct in the first place, you will continue to rebuild, and that just costs us a lot more money in the long run. Stop taking shortcuts. Stop taking shortcuts because you have no time left for shortcuts. You've got to do it properly in the first place. We need to know what money is available and what more needs to be done, and it has to be distributed transparently and fairly, so it's available to all communities that need it. All levels of government need to be better connected to our 3-tier, and our 3-tier system creates a lot of problems. There's a very big disconnect between federal, state and local government, especially local government. We need a national asset register so we know what we have and what can be deployed quickly to communities in need. We are miles away. We are miles off this. And we need to think about not only federal and state government assets, but also suitable local community and the private assets that are out there. And I don't think that you're joining the dots very well, I'll be honest with you. The disaster recovery funding arrangements need to be amended so money can be set aside for emergency payments that can be available a lot quicker than what they're getting it right now. Time is not on their side when you are hit with a flood and fire. It's just not on their side. We heard from the councils left with huge bills because they had to clear huge piles of rubbish off the streets. There aren't many councils with a lot of money to spend out there, and when they get fire trucks and other equipments, they have to pay to maintain them. That includes servicing, that includes parts, and it also includes operators. Great you guys in here or at state level to provide this equipment, but you don't provide anything else with it. And you expect the local council out there, with many of them those rural regional areas, have gotten hardly any money at all to sustain them And that's rubbish. I don't know what planet you're living on. That's never going to happen. It's just not. A lot of this equipment's actually sitting there, hardly ever being used. It's really shameful. What's more, they often have to spend hours filling out grant applications, and that often take weeks to get a response. When you're sitting in floodwater, you don't have time to do a grant. Come on. It shouldn't be that difficult when people's lives are in despair, when their lives have been turned upside down. And we're really doing a miserable job of it. We seriously are. I'm not having you guys over here. I know that it's been everybody in this, but we've got to do so much better at this. We really do. Maybe, and this is what really bothers me more than anything, the biggest message the committee got from everyone was the lack of volunteers and the ageing population of our volunteers. We have a problem. We have a problem in this country with volunteers. It's not happening. Okay, it's not happening. When a disaster hits the State Emergency Service Agencies Act, as the first responders protecting life and property, but this workforce is often underpinned, once again, by volunteers. The role of these volunteers cannot be understated. They're some of the most selfless, amazing Australians around, and I thank each and every one of them. One of the committee's recommendations is that the Australian Government consider amendments to the Fair Work Act 2009 to legislate time off for volunteers, and that volunteers be granted leave from employment like the provisions reservists get under the Defence Reserve Service. Volunteers need to be properly trained. Where the cost of relevant training is not the Australian Government, should consider amendments to legislation, policy and guidelines so volunteers working in organisations such as State, Emergency and Rural Bushfire Service can claim at the minimum at this point in time, deductions, training and courses that are part of their emergency volunteering at the very least. I have to be honest with you, we are doing a really bad job at this. We are not doing enough work on the corporates, and you people in here, the government of the day today could do something about what is going on here with the public service and start leading by example and get these guys to put some boots on. Get these guys to put some boots on and encourage them to do it. You have to lead from here. And I'm sorry to tell the public service that. And I know here's some boots, you need to go and put them on. But we have to do something. This is one of the most critical things that I found in doing this for the 20 months was the volunteerism. Okay? We have a huge public service in this country, yet we're not preparing them and getting them ready and able to combat disaster. My goodness, how shameful are we? And I'll tell you what, if there'd be a few of us in these chambers that could actually go and put some boots on too and get some training up ready to go. It's got to be one in, all in, otherwise it's never going to work. The government must consider how it can further support Disaster Relief Australia and other similar organisations, not only with funding beyond 2026, they need stability. You can't plan for 2 years and then say that's it, wondering whether you got funding, and it's just not working. It's an absolute failure. But also how the Australian Government can further incorporate Disaster Relief Australia into its national disaster response arrangements, puts its number through partnerships within the Australian Defence Force and Department of Veterans Affairs. We must find a way to incentivise young Australians to participate in volunteer organisations that provide support for disaster response and recovery. Once again, we are losing the volunteers, we're not gaining. The numbers are falling and they're falling quickly, and unfortunately my generation and below are not signing up. How about that? Okay, so you've got my generation, the next and the next out there. Okay, we have a massive gap, we have a hole. And this generation that's been doing all the heavy lifting up here, with all due respect to them, they're getting on. Okay, it's not because they don't want to do the heavy lifting, their bodies just won't allow them to do it anymore. So we have a real problem. And we need our young Australians, they're going to need to get on board. And we need to be open and honest with them. And we need to take responsibility for climate change and what's happening out there and ask them to help us. We need to ask for their help.
Thank you, Senator Lambie.